Sean Magennis has been an entrepreneur for over 30 years. He was working not that long ago before he became CEO of Capital 54, running a network, YPO. That network was made up of over 30,000 CEOs from 138 different countries, and between them their annual turnover was more than $9 trillion. His EA at that business was the wonderful Jackie Ludwig, and we know Jackie well because she's attended several of our events. So, when a couple of weeks ago I saw pop up on my timeline on LinkedIn that she and Sean had got together to form their own business, supporting executives and their executive assistants to work better in partnership, I couldn't rest until I got hold of Jackie and asked whether the two of them would give us an interview for Global. I was fascinated, not only by their partnership and how amazing that obviously is, but also why they felt the necessity to launch something that would, in effect, teach executives and their EAs how best to work together. Why did they feel that there was a need for that? I wanted to explore both those questions, but also I wanted to take a look at what a true business partnership looks like, because Jackie is now CEO of LUMINI Network and Sean is the chairman. So they've moved into a totally different relationship, and I wanted to look at what that looks like too. So please welcome Jackie Ludwig and Sean Magennis. So, Jackie and Sean, thank you so much for joining me today to talk to me about your new business, LUMINI. I think it's such an exciting new concept and it's really unusual. Can you explain to me a little bit about how you came up with the concept and what you're hoping it's going to achieve?
Thank you, Lucy, and great to be here with you and Jackie. Maybe I'll take a crack at this first one because it really came out of my relationship working with Jackie for the past 8 years. As you indicated in your introduction, I was the president and chief operating officer of a global business that operated in, 130 plus countries across 24 time zones. And we had clusters of both our management team as well as members in all those countries. And we worked literally almost 7 days a week. So managing boards, managing committees, managing 9 direct reports, you can imagine was quite a task, and I would not have been able to do it without Jackie's help and the methodologies and the systems that Jackie put in place for me. So, we were sitting down 6 months ago and reminiscing and looking back over the 7.5-year period, and it suddenly struck both of us and our business partner, Greg Alexander, that, this is something that we should explore in terms of how do we take the lessons that we establish together, how do we take the practical learnings and share it with others. And, that was the gestation of the idea. And then, on top of that, I would have many, in the hundreds of CEOs that we served at YPO ask me, how do you manage to do this? And I would always say, well, I have the most amazing right hand. So that was the gestation.
It's just so obvious when you explain it like that. But, it's interesting that there are very, very few executive assistant partnerships that have gone on to form a business together. And I know that you're really, really keen to talk about it as a peer-to-peer networking community as opposed to training. Why have you gone down that route particularly?
So the key for me was I spent 16 years in the Entrepreneurs Organization. It used to be called the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. It has about 14,000 business owners. I was a member for 16 years. I participated in the peer learning. I was in what's called a forum, both in EO and YPO. And then my next 15 years, I was very engaged in YPO, benefiting personally from the peer-to-peer interaction. And I don't think there's anything like it that exists for true in-depth experience sharing. It doesn't mean that you don't get reskilled, that you don't go through, post-education training. It's so important in a highly disruptive environment that we're in, particularly the technological environment, that we keep up to date with everything. But my experience, and Jackie, you can chime in, but I think there is no substitute from being with a group of individuals that go through what you go through every day, that understand the nuances and complexities of the administrative, professional, executive relationship. And those that get it right, we all, for me, I say it's having like a board of advisors in a way, and we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about the structure of LUMINI, but having that group that has your back, that's been where you are, that's faced the challenges you're facing, and who shares that in a highly confidential, very open, transparent way. There's nothing like it, Lucy, and we didn't see anything like it out in the market serving this incredible group of people. Jackie, do you want to chime in?
I would echo that. I know at YPO is a peer-to-peer community, and there was such value in the connections that all of the CEOs made. And as an EA, oftentimes you're the only one in the office, especially up in the C-suite. There's not really someone that you can talk to. So to have that peer community where you can go out and you can say, my executive just came to me and said he wants to clear his calendar for tomorrow afternoon. And then everyone in your community groans the same way because they understand what just happened there. Please don't do that. So it's that connection that you make with the community. There's someone else out there that's done what you've done, that understands implicitly what you're going through. And it's just very valuable.
Yeah, I don't think that there are enough relationships where the executive and the assistant are working together to make sure that things are working in a common direction. I think there's still quite often a lack of balance there with the importance of both roles being seen by the rest of the business in tandem. What do you think about that?
I think that's critical. I know when Sean and I, across our career together, everyone in the office knew that if Jackie was coming to see you, it was the same as Sean coming to see you. I would replace him in meetings. I would prepare him for meetings. Before Sean went into a meeting, he had an agenda. He had bios on all of the participants in the meeting. And if there was a little nugget of interest about that particular individual, I remember sending him to one meeting, and one of the parties in the meeting had the same birthday as Sean. So it just creates that conversation that makes it easy for him. And the person's like, oh my gosh, you know me. But those type of things. And when you can work that seamlessly together and that flawlessly, the rest of the office, the rest of your peers, they notice that. And they're like, how do they do that? And then suddenly they want the same thing. So you're more respected that way, I think, because you can work together flawlessly.
And Lucy, it does take work. It takes sitting down. Jackie and I, when we literally first started working together, was a lot of time we spent, dedicated time, talking through what makes for a good relationship for me, what makes for a good relationship with Jackie, what are the expectations. And that quickly establishes at least a trust foundation at the beginning. And then, the sustained ability to get together every week or multiple times a week and make sure that you're literally are connected and you're in agreement, and where there's disagreement that you candidly discuss that before it becomes an issue. Those were the little things that sound simple, but it requires patience, and it requires you actually making sure that you check the boxes on those items literally for both of you. Right. Because otherwise it's not going to be, in the long term you could get there, but setting it up right from the start. And then from a CEO or a C-suite executive's perspective, setting Jackie up to succeed was very important. So I had to walk the talk And so, when Jackie was in a meeting or she was representing me, I couldn't countermand or undermine that. I had to embrace that. And that required a degree of trust from my side that, Jackie was going to represent my thoughts, my responsibilities, my accountabilities well. But that requires literally understanding each other at a very specific level. And I'll go through a checklist with you in a bit, or some questions that may be useful to the audience when sitting down with a C-suite executive and vice versa.
I'm so pleased you brought up that daily huddle, that daily meeting, because especially at the moment with COVID, I have so many of my assistants that are saying to me, I can't get hold of my executive, we're not checking in on a daily basis, but it's okay because we're WhatsApping. And I am just so stunned by that, because to me, so much of communication...
Us too.
Yeah, just so much of communication is seeing people or hearing the tone of their voice. I just don't understand how you can possibly learn what your executive's priorities are for the day. And to me, my most important 10 minutes of the day are sitting down with Matt to work out what he's got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just 15 minutes. It's not a big, long conversation. You just go in there and, it's each day, tick, 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 and then you're off to the races.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Lucy, I struggle to not have the face-to-face, although we were very effective. 52% of my time I was on the road, and mostly out of the country, out of the United States, where we're based. But I'd be in Africa, I'd be in Asia, I'd be in Europe. And Jackie and I would still touch base. We'd figure out the time zones, we'd build in into my agenda, the check-in time. And I'd be sitting in a boardroom meeting or a conference facility. I'd have my computer, we'd pop up a quick Zoom and we'd touch base. Jackie would always, multiple times a day, ping me, is everything going well? Do you have what you need? And that collaboration is so important for me, particularly because I felt there was always somebody that if I needed something, I had immediate connectivity. Now, in some parts of the world, I had a meeting once in Kenya in a beautiful tented safari lodge with very poor Wi-Fi. So there are times where you have to go off the grid, but then, being prepared to be off the grid is fine. And also not to be too demanding. It's a balance, because we all need to have work-life balance.
Right.
And negotiating right up front what that means for each of us was also very important, because we have lives outside business.
For sure. It kind of leads me on really nicely to my next question, which is that your tagline is that behind every executive is a great support team. Can you talk to me about that in a bit more detail?
Sure. So most executives recognize a strong partnership with a support team. When they see it, they know it. And executives, they generally follow the 80-20 rule. So 20% of their time is spent creating 80% of the results. If they can offload that 80% of work, the in the weeds, the day-to-day grinding stuff, that allows them the 20% think time, if you will, to work on the revenue generation, on the strategy, on all of the macro level pieces that the executive needs to be focused on, that the company is paying the executive to be focused on, where the support team can handle all that 80% of the other things, the follow-ups, the chasing people. Do you have your PowerPoint ready? We got to be ready for this meeting. I need to make travel plans. I need to do the expense report. All of those things. Sean didn't have to worry about that because he knew that I had that. I could see that he's going to need this, this, and this. So I'm off running around the office chasing people to get this, this, and this. And he could focus.
It's Pareto's law, right?
Exactly, it's Pareto's law. And, for me, that 80-20, it's always the case, right? It's a universal law. It's almost primordial, I think. It applies to almost everything. And, for me, it was enabling me to focus on the high value items that were truly strategic in my role. And to have somebody helping me with time and also energy management, because personally, the administration side of running a business, and today everybody has to roll up their sleeves and do elements of that, it's a reality. But for me to be able to dedicate most of my time to the activities that I was being paid to do was so, so valuable, Lucy.
Absolutely. And it's what I've been preaching for the last 10 years. So it's so refreshing to hear a CEO actually say it. And I think for a lot of the assistants out there who are listening, it will be a real bing light bulb moment there.
Right.
And certainly something they'll be taking back to their executives. So talk to me a bit about your partnership then, because you've obviously got a very, very strong partnership. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, and how do they complement each other? I'm going to come to Jackie first.
Yes, for sure.
My strengths are, I get all down in the weeds. My head immediately goes, from the 30,000 foot idea level down into all the way down to the 1 foot level. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. Did we do that? All of those things on every topic. I'm really good at connecting. Sean's very good at that too, and I've learned a lot from him, but I know if I don't know the answer, I know who to go to get the answer. And often they would see me in the office, oh boy, here she comes. So you need those people in your office that if you don't have it, they've got it for you and they'll help you. But those building the relationships, going down into the weeds and just grinding on the details, those kinds of things are my strengths. That's what I bring to the partnership.
And then what would you say about my weaknesses?
Of course you have to.
Of course.
No, I think you talk your weaknesses.
Ah. So for me, I think it's a really great combination. I'm much more of, I'm less detailed, although detail and getting things done right are very important to me. But doing the detail is not a strength. When I do get tactical, it typically takes me a little longer, whereas Jackie has the amazing ability of literally, taking small steps one at a time, getting things done, and then presenting it in a way that's very thorough. Because of the nature of what I do, I tend to jump around a fair amount. I could have 7 or 8 meetings in a day, and they'd all be on a different subject with different people with different outcomes. And I was quite fine with that. But, the partnership ability, I will say one thing that was starkly valuable to me was Jackie had the ability to come to me before a meeting and say, remember this about this particular individual or circumstance, or, remember that, so-and-so's mom is not well. And, it may not have been top of my mind. And I think, just that reminder, it was very grounding for me. I mean, Jackie's a very practical, grounded person. And any great administrative professional is going to have the pulse of what's happening in the organization. I mean, Jackie knew more about, I think, what was going on in the company than I think a lot of the human resources professionals did. And that's not a knock against human resources. It's because Jackie had her eyes and ears and an extension for me on that basis. It was so helpful, Lucy.
For sure. And I know when you're talking about the detail stuff, as a CEO myself, I would rather stick pins in my eyes than start. And so thank God I have Matt who takes that and does it all for me.
That's why
it's so much easier.
Yes, you can see the stress level and you're like, just give that to me.
And it does take trust. It does take, it didn't take us long, maybe 4 or 5 months, but it does take trust on the part of the CEO to relinquish control over the things that they think that they should be in control of. And so if any CEO ever watches this, I would challenge them to really think about authentically giving up control and don't concentrate on the minutia, because that isn't a good utilization of a CEO's time, in my experience.
Well, actually, an executive at any level, and it was one of the questions I was going to ask, because I know that so many of my assistants say to me, they won't give up their email or calendar or travel planning or whatever, and they feel that it's something they should be doing for themselves. and the battles that they have in order to try and take that stuff away, which at the end of the day, the business is paying them to do what they are amazing at, which in most cases at the moment is saving the world and saving the business. So, you know, I tend to think, I would love to know from both of you what you would be saying to an assistant who was having problems weaning that stuff away from their executive, especially at the moment.
I think I would just try it for a trial period. You know, suggest to come to your executive with a plan. I think that I need to handle your email. You're looking stressed. I can handle that for you. We've been doing this for long enough. You know that I understand the business and I understand how you would respond to a particular situation. Let me try it for a week. Here's what I'll do. And I know you and Matt you've mentioned before the different folder system where Matt just slots things into the folders, which is an incredible idea. Something along those lines, and just creating a system and saying, here's how we're going to run it. And then the executive having the confidence in the EA and in themselves to say, okay, let's try that. If after a week it doesn't work, you haven't lost anything. If after a week it does, look at the amount of time that you, the executive, have gained, because now I can go through your email and sort out all the weeds and all of the noise, and you can focus on those high priority items. There's things that I've done for you. I've copied you on them. You see they're done. Boom, be done. Move on. You now have an hour, 2 hours more of time at the end of the week, because you're not all in your email trying to get through 400 emails at the end of a meeting filled day.
And I'll add one. Jackie and I have a system that we rate each meeting for what we call meeting quality. So we developed a very simple report card structure, because I was having so many meetings, and I'd come and complain to Jackie, and, well, that was a waste of time. That was the wrong person. I shouldn't have even been in the meeting. Yet I was taking these meetings. So what we did was we literally just developed a very, very simple A to F scorecard that said, do we have an agenda? Are the right people in the meeting? Are the outcomes clear? And at the end of the meeting, did we accomplish what we set out in the meeting? And then obviously each meeting had slightly different agendas in terms of topics. But at the end of every meeting, very, very quickly, I would rate it A, B, C, D, E, or F. I would hand that rating to Jackie. In the beginning, I actually filled out a little form, take me 5 minutes. It was just an Excel spreadsheet. And the most remarkable thing happened. We did it for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. And the meetings changed completely. Didn't they change dramatically?
It was amazing at the difference. Just in that 2-week window when we started saying that we're going to focus on the quality of these meetings, there was a pattern developed, and the quality shifted from 0 to 90 in 2 weeks' time.
And I would say we probably saved 3 or 4 hours a week.
Oh, easily.
Worth
60-minute meetings went to 30 minutes. Yeah.
Now, if you take, somebody that's a high-paid executive, say they're making, $500 an hour, you multiply that by 4, that's $2,000 a week of saved time that they could be spending on other things.
And it drops directly to the bottom line, which is what the value of an exceptional assistant is, of course. We do actually something with meetings, which is another almost scorecard system, but not in the same way as you. It's for external meetings. So if someone writes to me and says, Lucy, can I have a meeting? I write back with my brand and say, I'd love to have a meeting with you. Of course I would, but I'm copying in my assistant because he'll kill me if I play with my calendar. And then underneath the signature, I put a number between 1 and 5. And if it's 1, I want a meeting with that person almost immediately. If it's a 5, it will be a cold day in hell before you'll get a meeting with me. But then they are numbered after that, either 1, 15, 30, or 45, dependent on how long I want the meeting to be. So we never have to have those discussions anymore. It just, he knows how long I need it booked in for. He knows the time frame in which I want that meeting. And it just, but again, if it might only be 5 minutes per meeting that we're talking about it, but 5 minutes per meeting over the course of a year seriously drops to the time.
It's a serious time saving. And, part of our development of LUMINI was to take these methodologies and these lessons and not only share them with the administrative professional, but our model is I'm talking to every CEO of the company where their administrative professionals are members of LUMINI. That is a non-negotiable, because unless the CEO or the C-suite executive buys into it, the chance of them having this kind of, force multiply a very positive relationship is diminished. And so at the outset, we want them enrolled in, here's what's possible for you, and paint the picture of what's possible of this relationship, within this relationship, and on the part of the organization, because it's the administrative professional layer is so critical. And I think, and you and I have spoken about this, Lucy and Jackie, we're not giving the due to the administrative professional that we need to. And I think that's reflected in some of the statistics that you've recently shared with us in terms of some of the diminishing, some of the declining numbers of people in the profession. But I have some very strong views on that, because I do think that the role, both from the most junior levels to up to the chief of staff level, are critical going forward. And the CEOs that get it know it, and they appreciate it, and they really invest in it. And our goal is to push that thesis and hopefully, make some changes, because I think it's very important.
I think it's really interesting. You're referring to the 2020 Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, I think.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and that is saying that number 2 on the list of declining jobs is administrative professionals. And
Yeah.
I think it could be quite scary until you understand that the Bureau of Labour only recognises one level of assistant, and those are the junior ones who tend to be doing far more task-based things. So of course, in the Future of Jobs report, which is looking at AI and the 4th industrial revolution, it's going to be saying that anything that you can be doing twice in the same way is going to be automated. So if you're only looking at task-based roles, then yes, they probably will diminish. But this is where this picture that we're talking about and where LUMINI comes in, when you're looking at the more strategic level assistants and how they support at the highest level. And we spend an inordinate amount of time encouraging assistants to stop keeping their heads beneath the parapet and just focusing on the task-based, and to start looking at being more proactive and how they can support at a higher level, which is what I know you're endorsing.
Right.
Yes.
And there's importance in the administrative assistant level too, because they are the ones that are going to succeed. They're the succession planning for the EA. Yes. They're the ones that as EAs, we need to bring them along. We need to bring them up with us, sharing what we know, because we're not going to be here doing this until the end of time. So there needs to be someone coming in behind us, and they need to be as good as we are. So not only are we focused on the executive assistant, but we're focused on the administrative assistant too, because there is value in that role and in bringing that role along and growing them into the EA role.
Totally. I'm going to change tack very slightly and ask you about what advice you would give to an assistant who was having a horrible time with their executive, who wasn't allowing them to do any of the things that they felt they would like to get their hands on.
This has been there. So first of all, I would say just take a moment yourself, and when you're away, when you're at home, just quiet time, and sit down with a piece of paper and jot down the things that are difficult. Is it he's not giving me the email, she's not letting me do this, whatever those items are. And then one by one, go through and do the 5 whys. Well, why is it like this? You get an answer. Why is it? Why is it? Why is it? By the time you get to the 5th why, you generally have a root cause. Often through the whole partnership, 2 words always came out when Sean and I would talk about things: trust and communication. Yep. So is it because this unruly executive doesn't trust you enough to give it to you? Or is there not enough communication? Are they giving it to you, but then they feel like, I don't know what's happening? That's a simple, okay, this is done. You know, you return the email, done. Move on to the next thing. It's that communication and that trust. The thing to remember there is that sometimes as hard as we as EAs try to fix things, because that's just in our DNA, we want to fix things, we want to do things. There's just those instances where it doesn't work, where it's not a good relationship, and that's okay. That, you know, when you recognize that, if you've done everything that you feel that you can do and it still doesn't work, recognize that and move on. It's a learning. So it's not a failure, it's a learning. You've learned something from that. When you move to the next role, suddenly you know, I don't want this, I want that. And it gives you opportunity to have those questions in the interview process with the new executive. What is your, you know, how do you operate this way? How do you operate that way? So you can, you know, work through it certainly and do those 5 whys to figure out what the root cause of that difficulty is. And have that conversation with your executive. If there's an issue, take it to them and say, I see that we're having an issue with this. Here's what I think we should do about it. One of 2 things are going to happen. They're going to say, that's a great idea, or, and they'll still be the difficult, unruly one. But you'll get to the cause and you'll be able to either improve the communication and improve the relationship, or move along, move on to the next one. That's okay.
You can see how practical and pragmatic Jackie is. You know,
Wonderful advice.
Yeah, incredible. And, you know, I'd just add a little bit to that, saying, you know, the reality, because I've seen a lot of bad actors in the C-suite, unfortunately. And the ability for an administrative professional to literally be able to compartmentalize their emotion and their feeling is a skill that can be taught and learned. And we would spend a lot of time talking about and coaching, you know, our support teams to deal with difficult CEOs. I mean, we had a whole program just focused on how do you deal as part of the onboarding, and then on an ongoing basis, how do you deal with individuals? Firstly, you know, one of the basic things is, instead of yourself acting like a victim or trying to fix things, or, you know, trying to smooth things over, ignore it, is just literally recognize where you sit within that framework. I would recommend your audience read a book called The Empowerment Dynamic. It's called The Power of TED, T-E-D. It's by David Emerald. It's a very quick read. It's an hour and a half. But he has something called the drama triangle. And how do you deal with the drama triangle? What role do you see the individual that's really difficult? And quite honestly, at some points in time, it borders on harassment. Now, if it borders there, then you go to human resources and you take care of yourself, because taking care of yourself is the number 1 criteria. And we would speak about that and act on it a lot. But there are techniques and tips that you can deploy. It takes practice. It takes thoughtfulness. I always adopted the 24-hour rule, which is, if you are drawn into or being triggered by it, disconnect yourself from it, go out, you know, breathe, take a 24-hour break before you actually react to it. Not easy to do in reality, but it served me well personally. But I love the drama triangle framework. It's very easy. It's how do you move from, say, you know, a victim to a creator? How do you shift by using simple language, like help me to understand? Like, you know, I hear this and it makes me feel this way, because that puts the onus on the individual to respond in a mature fashion and often acts to de-escalate. So those are, I mean, this subject is a very vast subject, but I think, you know, you've got 2, 3 little things from us that may help.
Very definitely. And I shall go by that book. I haven't heard of that book before, and it sounds absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Him and his wife are just extraordinary people. And they do a lot of coaching in this area, but their work is very accessible, and I like it. I default to it almost, you know, weekly.
Now, with COVID, of course, everything has changed absolutely totally. And I know that a lot of our assistants are really struggling with the partnership now that they're not able to communicate as frequently or face to face, or that they're not able to read body language or gauge what the atmosphere is in person. What advice would you be giving to assistants that are feeling that lack of communication?
First, I would go back to that 15-minute morning huddle and make that just a quick Zoom call and put the time on the calendar, because if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. And if you're managing his calendar, managing the executive's calendar, you're in control of that. Guard that time. It's critical. You take 15 minutes, you go through things, you can see if there's a topic and Sean's face gets real straight. Oops, I better pay extra attention to this one. Other things you can get away with, but also, I know a lot of times, especially when Sean was traveling, just to keep things moving, I would send him an email and I would put it in bullet point format. There were questions, there was information, and there were follow-up, bullet, 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 bullet. And it just, I itemized all of the things underneath those 3 headings.
So
Sean
great.
could read it as time permitted, and then he would respond to each of the bullets. Shot it back to me, and then I could go on about and finish things up and tie things up while he was gone, or even during the week when it was an especially hectic week.
And very succinct, Jackie, no more than 14 words a sentence, bullet point, something that looks really good on a mobile device was so helpful. And it was a lifesaver in many situations, truly was.
It kept things moving.
Yeah.
Which indeed is what you're there for, I feel. All right. I want to move on to talk a little bit about being a new assistant for a second, and pointers that you would give somebody who was becoming an assistant at a higher level for the very first time. But also I know that you have a list of questions that you feel that an assistant should probably be asking when they take on a new role. Can you share those with us?
Sure. The first thing I would say to a new assistant is to get a pen and a notebook and keep it in your hand all the time, write it down. Because they're executives, they're up here and they're just whipping things off left, right, and center. You need to jot them down so that you don't miss anything. And you can take notes, you can ask questions. It's all in your notebook and you have it. It's a bit old school, but it's just handy. And then when it's finished, you can cross it off, which is, there's nothing that feels better than crossing off something on your to-do list. But also through my years of experience and Sean's as well, we put together a checklist of 44 different key KPIs or metrics, if you will, of items that, are you doing this? Is the assistant doing this with the executive? Is the executive doing it with the assistant? That just kind of, a lot of them are things you just really don't give conscious thought to.
Yes.
But when recognized, they make a huge difference.
Give me an example, Jackie.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So the most important, I think, right at the outset is, as a new assistant, I understand my executive's business goals, my role in helping her accomplish those business goals. Secondarily, I understand their personal goals. So how do I help you accomplish? Because there is no distinction in any kind of practical world between business and personal, particularly in this relationship. They're so intertwined that understanding both and clearly articulating those and getting understanding from the beginning is key. The other is, for an executive is, how do I adjust my work schedule to fit the work schedule of my executive? Because every executive has a slightly different work schedule. I'm a morning person, so I like to get going, crack of dawn, but after 7 o'clock, don't bug me. That's my time. That's when I'm at home. That's when I'm with family. That's when I do some of my thinking and planning. Now, in our world at YPO, I was doing a lot of 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock calls. And then there's the very specific things that you agree to do together. So whether it's are you prepared for the cadence and the tempo of your meetings? Are those clearly articulated? And again, it's expectation setting. So, we've also agreed on boundaries. Jackie and I were really clear on our boundaries. When I'm very much a family first leader, in the sense that if your family situation personally isn't right, you cannot function effectively and be expected to perform at a level, that's a high level. So if there are things that you need to take care of family-wise, go and take care of them. But those boundaries and those expectations have to be set up front.
Very definitely. And then your questions, what would you be asking an executive? Obviously, you'd be asking about personal goals, you'd be asking about business goals. And so those, those KPIs that you were talked about were there. But what other kinds of questions would you be asking, Jackie, of a new executive?
Of a new executive, I would ask communication preferences. Do you like to be, should we use Teams? Should we use text? Should we just call? If we sit across from each other, can I just pop in your office if I need something, or do I need to wait and just compile everything and pop in once? Those kind of little things, they don't seem big, but if it can be an annoyance and it can cause friction. So get that out of the way straight away. I would ask the executive the important dates, especially for the family, because executives' calendars are full and it's always full of business, but there are those times when it's a child's birthday. I would never fill an executive's day on either a spouse's birthday or a child's birthday. Nope, not going to happen. I would not fill a day on the executive's birthday either. I would have people, oh, is he available? Nope, not that day, but I can give you either day. And then, oh, he's really busy that day. Yes, he is. So that way they had some free time. If they want to put something on the calendar on their own birthday, that's okay. But little questions like that. Do you like, if you're a morning person, do you want me to be here in the morning as soon as you get here? Or is it okay that I get here an hour and a half later? And then, I stay until my work is done. Things like that. There's just little subtle nuanced questions. Again, going back to the communication, how do you like to communicate, that are critical, that new assistant can ask the executive right up front, and it clears the air really, really quickly.
I can tell what a really strong partnership you both have got, built on a long time of working together. But what I'd love to know is what you love most about your partnership.
For me, it is that trust word. It's been a remarkable 8 years. I mean, I trust Jackie to the degree that I'm investing both time and treasure in her and her career and her development. She's the CEO of LUMINI now, and that's an earned trust and respect. And hopefully I've earned Jackie's trust and respect over time. That it's a beautiful thing when you get it right, and it's a friendship that it's not intrusive. I mean, it's almost like we've just got in a groove, and we check each other, and there's this it's a very special thing when you get this happening.
When you do.
Both of you, thank you so much for your time. It's been illuminating and it's been inspiring, and I know my audience is absolutely going to love it. I shall make sure that we put in the chat box your contact details, so that if anybody wants to reach out to you, they're very able to do so. And we shall also put a booth in our booth area so that there's information there if people want more information about LUMINI as well. But in the meantime, thank you both enormously for giving up your very valuable time, and best of luck with the organisation. I have a feeling it's going to be really successful.
Magic. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. We appreciate the time with you today.
Bye-bye all.
Thank you both so much.